Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to Protect Your Nonprofit from Financial Fraud.
My name is Matthew Eshleman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. Carole?
Thanks, Matt. So I'm a Senior Manager and Market Leader for your part-time Controller's Washington, D.C. office. We know that to help prevent and detect, we have to understand that, first of all, we're dealing with people. Humans are involved. And one of the first ways that we can prevent and detect is right from the top, promote an environment of healthy skepticism. Make sure that you're empowering employees to ask questions and not feel rushed or pressured to process payments. Make sure they're taking their time to hover over links and look closely at the sender's email address for misspellings. We often, suggest use forward instead of just reply. So you're forced to type in a known email address. Don't click on the links. Don't return calls to an unfamiliar phone number. Make sure that you look at a trusted outside source, reliable source for that company phone number. And definitely before you're transferring funds or making a change to banking information, make a phone call and confirm with someone that you know. The client that I talked about earlier, we implemented Bill.com after that incident, and some of the other steps that we put in place. We used payment instructions that were included in an original contract to set up vendor payment. And any change from that bank information in that original contract needed to be independently verified and approved by both the CFO and the program manager. We said verify using that pre-established phone call or a video chat. We also have seen some of our clients using a small test deposit, for $1 for new vendors to verify that it is that known vendor contact. And if you're doing a wire and, create a wire template for vendors with recurring invoices. And again, any change to that wire template, needs to be reviewed and verified by the CFO. And of course, limit the use of domestic wires anyways. If you're processing all of payments through, a bill pay system, you're going to have that extra prevention and also detection.
I think that's great. I think all of those controls just to have in place for any changes, because I think that's what we'll take a look at, here is, kind of the example of how these email threads kind of get carried out. Right.
And Matt, I know that attacks where global businesses are affected through the contractors, that has definitely become a clear trend. We know that business data is typically distributed across multiple third parties, including service providers, partners, suppliers, and subsidiaries. And so organizations need to consider not only the cybersecurity risks affecting their IT infrastructure, but those that come from outside it as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we can take a minute for an incident that we investigated. And here we have a screen capture from an organization that emailed their funder about updates to payment information. And let's see how we got here and what happened. So I'm actually going to flip over and we will take a look at the actual email thread. And so some of these things may be seem familiar to you. So originally we have some information here from the executive director. Their domain was compromised, so they had a compromised account or accounts, and so the bad guys were there. And so the organization was following up with their foundation and the foundation assistant to get some additional information about the invoice for their funding. So we can see some back and forth from the foundation back to the organization that was compromised. From the executive assistant at the compromised domain, we see some communication, apologizing for the delay in processing. That's often a tip-off that we see, right? There's a problem with our bank account. We've had some suspicious activity. We need to provide you with some new information. So that often is a clue that something is happening. Again, some back and forth, apologizing for the delay, trying to find time on the schedule. That's always a key issue for many organizations. Again, some tells here. We have recently made some changes to our payment information. Kindly disregard the previous information. Again, pointing to some of those controls that Carole mentioned before in terms of how do you establish a flow to approve changes to payment information that are different. And here we can see that both the executive assistant account and executive director account, they're both compromised and they're both interacting with their foundation in order to kind of perpetrate this fraud. So again, the foundation has some controls in place. They need a name and contact information to sign out, to send the new DocuSign information. The hacker actually created a new account on the compromised domain and assigned it, gave it a name, right? Angela Bergdorf, that's who's the person who is now controlled by the hacker completely. So now the hacker has kind of moved off of the staff account into an account that they control solely. The foundation has some controls where they need to do some call information. The hacker replies back with the ACH information, provides a phone number to verify. Again, there's problems with the phone, and as Carole mentioned, having those pre-established controls in place so that you have a number on file to call instead of just calling a number that an account provides you is a good practice, so that you have a good verified phone number to have communication on instead of relying on what could be a fraudster providing you a number that's controlled by them. And here we even have problems with the foundation. Like, they were having tech issues too, and so there was some back and forth. And here we go, the hacker gives them an updated number. They go back and forth. They're trying to, negotiate these terms. You can kind of see the hacker is getting feeling like they're almost have a big score. They can almost taste it, because they are providing both an office landline and a mobile phone in the US to provide. So again, this is an organization, I think, that was based in London. And so they're doing the follow-up. The foundation received that confirmation of the updated information, and we can see the hackers following up to ask when they're going to get paid. When are they going to get paid? When are they going to get paid? So there's some urgency there. And then finally, we can see from the managing director at the foundation, it ran into some of their financial controls to say, hey, this is a fraudulent account that was provided. We have recalled the payment, and they were basically suspended at that time, and kind of the ruse was up. But you can see that there was a long conversation. There was an email provided for the accounts payable person. There was phone number verification that was provided by the hacker. And so all of these different steps were, a relatively well-constructed ruse for this fraudster to take over an account at a legitimate organization and then try to perpetrate fraud against the foundation that was, expecting to make a payment to that organization. So that was one example where we have a compromised account of an existing organization. And then this is an example of what is called typo squatting. So with typo squatting, I'd love for you all to, if you want to chat in and let me know which of these 3 domain names are illegitimate. So there are 3 valid domain names, and then there are actually 3 domain names here that were established by some hackers. So you want to chat in? I'd love to see if anybody can identify what the fake domains were. So we've got Grameen Kota, we've got ID First Bank, we've got Phoenix Legal. This one is very, I think, very interesting and very tricky to uncover. So here we see that in this case, the fraudsters really planned out their attack in great detail, and this was actually an attack that would have been an 8-figure haul if they had been successful. So in this example that we'll talk about, there's multiple exploits, the compromise of some internal accounts, which gave the hacker insight into when and how to attack. And we can see that they set up domains that were very similar. So Grameen Kota, there's an extra O, ID First Bank, let's see, we're missing an I in that second one, and then Phoenix Legal, they simply registered a domain name in India instead of the Netherlands. So there's lots of care and attention that was put into this, and we can see that the payoff would have been 8 figures. So again, we've got those examples of a very sophisticated attack for this. So again, we can see from IDFC First Bank, which is the fake account that was set up, to Grameen Kota, which is the legitimate organization, also mixed in with Grameen Kuta, which was the, actually I need to go back, and I think it's Grameen Kota is the legitimate one. So you can see it's very, very tricky to kind of determine, and so there's lots of different elements here. Again, the same pattern where we see the previous bank account information is unavailable. We need to provide some updated information so that you can update your payment information so we can complete the transaction. So again, very sophisticated attack in order to achieve a financial gain here. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about those tools and techniques that organizations can put in place to help prevent this type of fraud from being successful. I think it's important for organizations that the tone needs to come from the top. So the executive leadership needs to kind of say that this is important. The staff training that can be involved needs to also be advocated from the very top levels of the organization, and then internal controls need to be well communicated so that the staff know what to do and how to do it. And then finally, implementing technical controls such as multi-factor authentication, maybe those advanced email protection tools, and even basic things like making sure that your computer is up to date so that you aren't susceptible to viruses are all good steps to make sure are in place at your organization. So I'm going to have Carole talk a little bit more detail about some of the financial practices to put in place.
Thanks, Matt. And that first one, it's the same as the IT tool is the same as the financial tool. So we know fraud happens. So, what are some things that we can do? The best way to protect against cybercrime, as Matt just said, is that heightened awareness. And it's really establishing that awareness at every level of the organization. It has to come from the top, but it has to infiltrate at every level. It's not just the job of IT or finance or a combination. It's everyone needs to be involved in trying to protect the organization from fraud. And it's an ever evolving landscape, cybersecurity landscape. So we know that your people are the best defense against a cyber incident. So, but you do also need to understand that there will be conflict between the ease of use and the cybersecurity. So for instance, multi-factor authentication that Matt mentioned, it adds steps, right? So educate your team on why are we doing this, and help them overcome that hurdle, and embrace the cybersecurity efforts to ensure the mission's continuity and security, and then be able to explain that in turn to donors and funders. You want to understand the high-risk areas, assess and test, audit your current IT infrastructure, where are you currently, what do you have to protect, where are weaknesses, what can you do about them, and that will help you gain visibility over what's happening, so you can design a roadmap for where you want to be and how to get there. And then lastly, you need to have policies and procedures, and then not just have them, but enforce them. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about two issues of cybersecurity preparedness, or two things that you need to have. One is that privacy policy. What personal info is collected and how is that information used. There are lots of great examples of privacy policy out there. I know Charity Navigator has one, and I think the Nonprofit Learning Lab also in their library. So know what personal info is collected and how it's used. The other thing you want to have is a data breach response plan. So typical things that you might see in a data breach response plan are reporting protocols, response team roles and responsibility. Who is that team of experts that you're going to assemble? How are you going to secure physical areas? What's your communication strategy to all the different stakeholders? Do you have legal support in place should a breach occur? What is your cyber breach insurance? Make sure that you understand that you have the proper coverage you need, and then also what is the plan to notify law enforcement? So what do you do if fraud is detected? We recommend that you develop a policy and procedure to guide employees on the proper steps to take. So you should have, the development of a fraud work plan for investigating, for communication, for limiting access to assets. So, the first thing you may want to do is hold that emergency board meeting, and investigate further. What we need to collect all the pertinent info. We know that fraudsters rarely restrict activities to just one method. There may be, other things that they're doing. So you want to block access to accounts to prevent further loss, close the bank accounts, submit the claim to recover lost money, assemble that team. And as a nonprofit, public relations is really important. You may want to, show integrity and come clean if there has been a significant breach. Don't wait to report it on the Form 990, that nonprofit that I mentioned before with the $1 million construction issue. They issued a statement on their website about it, and they posted it, the information in their 990, their annual tax return. And so you want to, make sure that you have a plan and fully understand that. And also training for employees. It's not just training, but then it's also retraining. You want to, change those behaviors to reduce vulnerabilities and build that resistance to fraud. We know that the only thing worse than a data breach is multiple data breaches. So, here we have a fraud prevention toolkit for you. And this is not just cybersecurity, but sort of all of fraud prevention. And, these are the three areas that you can focus on to reduce risk. So as we said, one of the most important tools in your toolkit is that healthy dose of professional skepticism. Make sure you are, asking questions and demanding accountability. If something doesn't seem right, keep asking questions until you you really understand. Oversight starts with the board, and that tone at the top that we've talked about. If it is understood that it is important at the top, that message that we are paying attention is going to come through. We always say make sure that you hire the right people, right from the beginning. People that are put in positions of trust and authority, there may be extra steps that you want to go through when you're hiring those folks. Doing a complete background investigation and, go that added step and ask for individuals' consent if you need that enhanced background check for personal financial situations, as well as the criminal records. In any kind of, fraud case, whether it's cybersecurity or the good old-fashioned financial fraud, making sure that policies and procedures are well documented, and that everyone is aware of what those internal controls are, and that they're enforced. And the other thing you need to do is make sure that you're constantly reviewing them for changes in situations with, with the switch to remote work. If you haven't already, make sure that you are going back and reviewing all those policies and procedures and updating them for, the different ways that we are handling payments. And, and then the other, that's all the tone at the top. Segregation of duties, of course, is really important. This first one, the daily review of online bank balances and monthly reconciliations, we make that recommendation for all of our clients. And you should always be doing this to make sure that there aren't any bank errors, but especially in this time of cybersecurity, we have clients who actually were able to, with this daily review of the online bank balances, identify and find fraud and stop it before it was too late. So that is just a critical step or a critical tool in your toolkit that's easy, doesn't cost anything. So have, whether it's the executive director or maybe it's the COO reviewing that. And of course, having all, the checks and balances, having the board look at things that the executive director is approving. And then in terms of policies and procedures, again, make sure that you have, the cybersecurity insurance, also the D&O, the directors and officers liability insurance, and the cybersecurity training. It's not just, an annual thing. It's ongoing and constant, and keeping everyone on their toes. And of course, just having good practices where there is a 990 review and an annual audit will also help with fraud protection. And the no organizational credit cards, we know that's an area that is very rife for fraud. So that's, if you can eliminate those, you're eliminating a big risk of fraud. So go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just saying, I think it's really a comprehensive list, and the no organizational credit cards is an interesting note to see there. I know we're getting near the end of our time, and so I wanted to quickly, add some IT security best practices. Carole's already talked about the importance of training, and I think training covers a wide variety of things, from security awareness to make sure those emails are not being clicked, to some of those financial practices and making sure staff are educated in how that needs to be executed. We know that security awareness training is effective. We're a KnowBe4 partner, and this is some of the statistics that they share. So for organizations, SMB nonprofits, they see baseline phishing tests where almost 40% of people are clicking on those links that come through in messages. But after about a year of training time, that number really falls down into the low single digits, and that really does mirror our experience whenever we are deploying security awareness training to new organizations. And our approach is to have that main annual training that everybody goes through, but also supplements that with quarterly micro trainings, because security awareness training is something that really should be built into the culture of the organization and be done throughout, and not something that you just do kind of once a year because you have to. Along with security awareness training, there are some important technical things that your organization should be doing. And the number one thing would be multi-factor authentication. And so that combines something that you know, which is your password, along with something you have, which is often a token or an app on your phone. And this really has a dramatic impact on the security of your online digital accounts. Last year, Community IT responded to a number of compromised accounts, but none of them had actually implemented multi-factor authentication. So we see it in the data from the organizations that we serve. And then organizations, Google has what they call Project Zero, which is their security research team, and they identify that the most common attacks that nonprofits are going to face, which are kind of these automated bot or bulk phishing attacks, multi-factor authentication is very effective in preventing those attacks from being successful, in terms of having your password be disclosed and then being used to log in and then target other users from your account. So multi-factor authentication, if you have not already implemented on all systems that you can log into from the internet, is something that should be high on your to-do list after coming out of this webinar. There's also some advanced email security protection that are available. As we showed some of the screenshots earlier, those messages are very hard for traditional anti-spam solutions to protect against. There's not much text in them. They're very short. They often, will not even have malicious links in them. So it is hard to block those with regular spam prevention tools. But there are some next generation tools that are able to combat those types of threats. So again, I think it's important for the IT perspective to make sure that you've got those security controls in place, make sure that you're doing training and implementing multi-factor authentication on your systems, and you'll be able to really provide some protection against accounts being compromised, which then often can then be pivoted into the more sophisticated financial attacks that Carole's talked about.
Yeah, I think we can review our learning objectives. So, and I think we've done great on time. We might have time for questions. I just will wrap up with saying that we discussed the cybersecurity landscape and the reasons of why nonprofits are particularly vulnerable and why now. We gave you some types of cybersecurity incidents, and I loved that example that Matt walked through. It's very clear to see how easy it happens. And then lastly, we gave you some great takeaways, some toolkits, IT tools, and financial tools to help prevent and detect fraudulent activity. And with about a minute, do we have any questions that we can answer?
Yep, thank you, Carole and Matt. It looks like we have time for just one question. Do you consider the Google Workspace to be secure?
Yes, I think that's a good question, because I think it helps to, I think the response is any platform can be used securely, or any platform can be used insecurely. So Google Workspace, I think, is a great platform. From a technical perspective, we're not concerned about, Google getting hacked, kind of on the back end or anything like that. But it's important to use the Google Workspace securely. And so that would mean turning on multi-factor authentication. So any account that logs in should have multi-factor authentication. And then your organization should also have pretty clear policies and practices around how you are saving and sharing data. So again, being clear that maybe data for the finance department is only available to organizational users and cannot be shared outside the organization. Maybe same thing with HR data. And then I think it's also important to incorporate your organization's backup and disaster recovery plan as part of it. So again, understand your data retention requirements and make sure that you are able to meet them in the platform. So again, any platform can be used securely, and any platform can be used insecurely as well. So as long as you are taking that deliberate planning approach, turning on multi-factor authentication, regularly getting rid of departed staff accounts, making sure the data can't be shared unintentionally, then you can feel confident in that platform and know that it'll be secure.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Matt and Carole. This workshop has now come to a close. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Carole and Matt, for educating our community.
Great.
Thank you.
It's great to join.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.